The man returned home one evening, his body tired from a long day, expecting the quiet comfort of his house to greet him. But the moment he pulled up to his driveway, his eyes froze and his heart dropped. His mailbox was lying in pieces on the ground again. The post snapped, the door bent, the metal dented like it had been hit with full force. His hands tightened on the steering wheel as his stomach turned. This wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the second. This was the third time in a row that his mailbox had been destroyed, 3 times in just a matter of weeks, and each time the damage looked the same, too deliberate, too focused, too personal to be an accident. He stepped out of his car slowly, his boots crunching against the gravel. His jaw tight with anger, he crouched down, lifting the broken box in his hands. The screws were bent, the pole splintered, the ground around it dug up. His breath grew heavy as he stared at the wreckage. His garden lights flickered on behind him, casting a dull glow over the street, and the more he looked at the pieces, the more rage boiled inside him. This wasn't some random act of mischief. No group of kids running around late at night. No careless driver swerving off the road. This was targeted. Someone had done this on purpose. Someone wanted to break him. And in his mind there was only one name that fit: Karen, the HOA president. The woman who had been a thorn in his side since the day he moved into the neighborhood. She had complained about his grass being too long, his trash can being left out too early, his car being parked slightly outside the driveway. Her letters came weekly, her fines came monthly, and her glare came daily. It was never enough for her to run the HOA. She had to control every inch of everyone's property. And now, he was sure, she had found a new way to make his life miserable. He set the broken pieces down, his hands shaking, his mind racing back to the first time it had happened. He had returned home from work to see the mailbox bent sideways, the wood cracked. He had thought maybe it was a freak accident. Maybe a delivery truck clipped it. He had replaced it quietly, not wanting to stir trouble. But only a week later it had happened again. The second mailbox smashed just as badly, and when he had confronted Karen casually at the HOA meeting, she had smiled coldly and said, "Maybe you should try following community standards. Those mailboxes of yours never really matched." Anyway, the memory of her smug face made his fists clench tighter now. She had practically admitted it then. And now, with a third destroyed box in his hands, he had no doubt, it was her. The man stood up slowly, looking around the quiet street. The sun had dipped low. The houses lined neatly with porch lights glowing faintly, curtains twitching here and there. He could feel eyes watching him, maybe neighbors, maybe even Karen herself hiding behind her blinds, her grin stretching as she enjoyed his frustration. He took a deep breath, forcing his anger to stay steady, because exploding here on the street would only give her the victory she wanted. He carried the broken box to the side of his porch, setting it down like a fallen soldier, his heart pounding as he stared at it. 3 times, 3 mailboxes destroyed, 3 warnings that she would not stop until he bent to her will. But he was not going to bend, not this time. His mind drifted back to the little things that made this mailbox more than just a box. It was where letters from his family arrived, where he found his morning newspaper folded neatly, where holiday cards and small packages had been delivered. It was a small thing, but it mattered. It was his, and seeing it shattered again and again was like someone tearing into his life. The man turned, looking at Karen's house across the street, her porch light glowing, her car parked neatly in the driveway, the blinds closed tightly as always, but he could almost feel her eyes, almost hear her laughter in the quiet air. He whispered under his breath, "You won't win this time." The words carried no sound for anyone else, but for him they were heavy, a promise. He walked back to his door, unlocking it and stepping inside, the broken mailbox still in his mind. He dropped his keys on the counter and sat heavily at the table. His hands pressed against his face. He thought of calling the police, reporting vandalism. But he knew what would happen. Karen would deny it, the HOA would side with her, and without proof it would be labeled as nothing more than an unfortunate accident. He thought of replacing it again, going to the store, buying another cheap post, setting it in the ground. But the thought made him sick. It would only invite her to smash it again. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, the silence of the house filling his ears. The anger inside him grew sharper, harder, until it turned into resolve. He wasn't going to replace it with something weak this time. He wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing him defeated again. No, he would come up with something different, something she wouldn't expect. But for now, as the night settled in and the quiet street grew darker, He sat alone with his thoughts. The broken mailbox outside his window like a scar on the land. His heart heavy, his mind sharp, and the name of the one person responsible burning in his head like fire. Karen. The battle had begun. And she didn't even know it yet. The next morning the man walked out to his driveway, the sun barely up, the air still cool, and his eyes went straight to the broken pile where his mailbox had been the night before. The sight made his stomach twist again. He crouched down and touched the splintered wood, the sharp edges biting against his fingers. He shook his head slowly. This wasn't some random act. This was too clean, too repeated, too deliberate. It had become a pattern. The first time he had told himself it might have been an accident. Maybe a truck hit it while turning. Maybe kids playing around had knocked it down without thinking. The second time he had felt uneasy but still gave benefit of the doubt. He replaced it and hoped for the best. But now, a third time in a row, the exact same way, the box smashed, the post broken, the ground around it kicked and dug. It was obvious someone wanted it gone. Someone was sending a message. His jaw tightened as his eyes lifted slowly. Toward the house across the street, Karen's house, the blinds pulled half open now, and he could swear he saw them move as though someone had just peeked through. He clenched his teeth. Every time his mailbox had been destroyed, Karen was close by. Every time it happened, she had some slick comment ready at the HOA meeting, a little smile, a little suggestion that maybe his mailbox didn't fit the neighborhood standard. He remembered her words clearly after the second incident, her lips curling with that smug smile as she said, "Well, maybe if you followed the guidelines, it wouldn't keep happening." She had said it loud enough for others to hear, but with that fake innocence she always wore like a mask. It made his blood boil to think about it now. Storms didn't come 3 times in the same week. Kids didn't return to smash the same house every time. Only someone with a reason, someone with power, someone who wanted to break him down, and that person was her. He walked back inside, sat at his table, and opened the folder where he kept HOA notices, flipping through the stack. So many papers, so many pointless warnings. The grass was too tall, the paint on his fence was too bright, his car parked too close to the curb, his porch light left on too long, all signed with her name at the bottom. Every paper a reminder of her obsession with control. His mailbox had never been against the rules, not once. It was plain, simple, black and white like every other mailbox. But that didn't matter. What mattered was she wanted him to bend, to obey, and when he didn't, she struck. His eyes narrowed as he thought of her walking past his yard, looking down at the box, her hand itching to tear it apart. Maybe she even enjoyed hearing the snap of the wood, the crash of the metal door hitting the ground. His fists curled tight on the table, his chest rising and falling heavy. He stood suddenly and walked back to the window, staring across the street. Karen's blinds were closed again. But he could feel her presence, like a shadow watching, waiting. He whispered under his breath, "You think you've won. But this is only the beginning." He grabbed his phone and snapped more pictures of the broken box, documenting every angle, every splinter, every dent. He wasn't going to let this pattern disappear into silence. Not this time. He saved them all, adding them to a folder of proof of harassment, proof of destruction, proof of her vendetta. His heart thudded as he closed the phone, a deep breath filling his lungs. He knew what this meant now. It wasn't just about a mailbox. It was about control, about power, about someone trying to crush his spirit one small step at a time. But he wasn't the type to bow down. He had rebuilt the mailbox twice before, but each time it had been weak. Each time she had smashed it like it was nothing. But now he was done playing the same game. He would not just replace it. He would not just accept the cycle. He would end it. He would make sure that the next mailbox she touched would be the last time she ever tried to break him. He stared out at the street, the broken mailbox lying in the dirt like a fallen soldier, and he felt the anger in his chest harden into resolve. This wasn't just a little game anymore. It was war, and this time he would be ready. The man woke up the next morning with the broken mailbox still heavy in his mind. His coffee sat untouched on the table as he stared out the window toward Karen's house. The blinds moved slightly and he knew she was watching. She always watched. She lived for control. And the destruction of his mailbox was just another tool for her to tighten her grip. His chest burned. With anger but also with determination. This time he wasn't going to stay silent. This time he would confront her directly. He walked outside, his boots crunching on the gravel, the morning air sharp in his lungs, the wreckage of the mailbox still sitting by the curb like a crime scene. Neighbors peeked from their porches, pretending not to stare but clearly waiting to see what would happen. He ignored them, his eyes fixed only on the house across the street. Karen's house, neat and spotless, like she demanded everyone else's to be, her car polished, her hedges trimmed with unnatural perfection. It was all part of her act. She wanted control so badly that she built her world to look like a rule book. He marched across the street, his fists tight at his sides, his footsteps firm, and when he reached her porch he knocked hard on the door. The sound echoed through the house. For a moment there was silence, then the door creaked open and Karen appeared, her smile sharp and fake, her voice dripping with mockery. "Well, good morning, what a surprise," she said as though she hadn't been expecting him all along. His eyes narrowed, his voice heavy. "My mailbox was smashed again. This is the third time, and I know you're behind it," he said, no hesitation, no attempt to soften the words, her eyebrows raised, her lips curved into a smug smirk. "Oh dear, again, how unfortunate," she said with fake sympathy. "But you can't possibly think I had anything to do with it. Can you, maybe? It was teenagers, maybe a storm, things happen, you know." She shrugged casually, her voice light as if the destruction of someone's property was no more serious than a leaf falling off a tree. His chest tightened, his fists clenched, but he kept his voice steady. "Storms don't come 3 times in a row. Teenagers don't hit the same house every week. This isn't an accident, it's targeted, and you know it." Her eyes glittered, her smile stretching wider. "Maybe if you followed community standards, your mailbox wouldn't stand out so much, perhaps then no one would bother with it," she said smoothly, the words sharp like knives, her tone careful but loaded. His blood boiled as he realized what she meant. She was admitting it without admitting it, twisting the story to make it his fault, shifting blame the way she always did. He leaned forward slightly, his voice hard. "My mailbox met every standard. It was plain, simple, nothing different from anyone else's. The only difference is that you wanted it gone." Karen tilted her head, her smile never fading. "Oh please, don't be dramatic. I hardly have time to worry about a mailbox. If it was destroyed then clearly it wasn't sturdy enough. Perhaps you should replace it with something more appropriate," she said, her tone laced with sarcasm. Neighbors across the street whispered louder now, watching the standoff like it was theater. The man's jaw clenched, his voice rising. "Appropriate? You mean something that fits your idea of control, something that bends to your rules. You smashed it because you couldn't control me. But I'm not bending, not this time." Karen's smile faltered for just a moment, her eyes narrowing. But then she laughed softly. "You really should calm down. Shouting at me won't fix your little problem, and without proof, well, no one is going to believe your accusations," she said, her words cold and calculated. The man took a step back, his chest heaving, his anger burning hotter. But his mind sharp. She was right about one thing. Without proof it was his word against hers, and she knew how to twist words better than anyone. But he wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing him defeated. He pointed a finger at her, his voice steady again. "You can deny it all you want, but the truth will come out, and when it does, you'll regret every box you smashed." Her smirk faltered again, just for a flicker. Then she slammed the door shut with a snap, leaving him standing on her porch, the neighbors whispering louder now, some shaking their heads, some even smiling faintly. Because they too had seen through her mask, he turned slowly and walked back to his house, his fists still tight, his chest burning, but his mind clear. She thought she had control, but her excuses were crumbling, her lies weaker, and he knew deep inside that the day was coming when she wouldn't be able to hide behind them anymore. That night the man sat at his kitchen table with the broken pieces of the mailbox still piled outside like a reminder of war, his head heavy with frustration but his resolve sharper than ever. He thought maybe Karen would leave it alone for a while now that he had confronted her. Maybe the fear of being caught in front of the neighbors would slow her down. But deep down he knew her too well. She thrived on control. She wouldn't stop until she broke him or forced him to bend to her rules. The morning proved him right, because taped neatly to his front door was an envelope with the bold HOA logo stamped across it. His chest tightened the moment he saw it. His hand ripped it off the door and unfolded it. The words inside were like poison dripping onto the page, "Notice of violation." It read in big dark letters. His eyes scanned the lines quickly, and with every sentence his anger boiled hotter. According to the HOA, his mailbox design was non-compliant and failed to meet the standards of community appearance. They claimed the destruction was proof of weakness and that it had to be replaced immediately with an approved style. The fine for non-compliance was listed at the bottom. His jaw locked, his fist tightening so hard the paper crumpled in his grip. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was a trap. Karen had smashed the mailbox again and again just to create the excuse she needed to send this letter. She had staged the destruction so she could wave a paper in his face and say it was official. His stomach turned as he imagined her sitting at her desk last night writing it. Her smug smile stretched wide as she planned how to break him. He slammed the paper down on the table and leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. If he paid the fine, she would win. If he replaced the mailbox with one of her approved styles, she would win. No matter which way he turned, she had set the trap so that he would end up under her thumb. But then his eyes narrowed and a bitter smile tugged at his lips, because what Karen had forgotten was that he had patience, he had proof, and he had the will to fight. He pulled out the folder where he kept every letter she had ever sent, thick now with years of petty warnings, photographs of his smashed mailboxes, receipts from replacements, even notes from neighbors who had whispered about her cruelty. He added the new violation letter to the stack. His proof was becoming a wall, a weapon. Something too strong for even her lies to cut through. He looked out the window at the broken box in the dirt and imagined her face when she realized he wasn't going to play her game. He wasn't going to replace it with something weak and ordinary. He wasn't going to bow to her approved list. No, he was going to build something she couldn't touch. Something so strong and so unexpected that her obsession would turn against her. The thought filled him with a strange calm, his anger cooling into cold determination. Across the street, Karen's blinds shifted slightly, and he could almost see her silhouette watching, waiting for him to crumble. But he only stared back with steady eyes, whispering under his breath, "You have no idea what's coming next." The paper lay on his table, its words meant to humiliate him, but instead it became fuel. Every line of that violation letter made him stronger. Every word of her trap only pushed him closer to his plan. He folded it carefully, slid it into the folder, and closed it with a heavy thud, the sound echoing through the empty kitchen like a promise. He would not bend, he would not break, and soon Karen would learn that she wasn't the only one who could play games. Because this time, the next move was his. The man sat in his living room late into the night, the violation letter still burning in his mind like a brand, his anger sharp but his thoughts clearer than ever. He knew now that Karen wasn't simply being petty. She was waging a war, breaking his mailbox over and over until she could claim it wasn't compliant, then backing her lies with official HOA letters designed to trap him into paying fines and replacing it with something she approved. It was a cycle, and if he gave in once, he would never be free. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the folder of evidence sitting on his table. But even as he thought about fighting her through the state office or taking legal action, another idea began to form. Something more immediate, something she wouldn't see coming. He walked outside into the cool night air, the broken remains of his third mailbox still lying in the dirt like a pile of bones. He crouched down, his hand brushing the splintered post, and whispered, "You wanted it gone, but the next one will outlast you." The plan had taken root. He would replace it, but not with something weak, not with something ordinary. He would build a mailbox so strong, so unbreakable, that when she tried her little game again, the only thing broken would be her pride, maybe even her hands. He stood slowly, his eyes fixed on the dark street. Karen's house sat across from his, lights out but blinds still shut tight, and he imagined her smug face pressed behind them, thinking she had one. He let out a small bitter laugh. She had no idea. He went back inside, opened his laptop, and began searching, his fingers tapping rapidly as he scrolled through sites. Steel posts, reinforced mailboxes, heavy-duty locks, even ones designed to withstand baseball bats and sledgehammers. His heart beat faster as he looked at them, each stronger than the last. He found one that caught his eye, a design used for rural properties where vandalism was common, built with steel walls, bolted into a reinforced post with concrete, advertised as virtually indestructible. His lips curled into a grim smile. This was it. This would be the answer. He placed the order quietly. No announcements, no hints, not even to the neighbors. He didn't want Karen to catch wind of his plan. She thrived on knowing everything, on controlling information. And this time he would leave her in the dark. After placing the order, he leaned back, closing his eyes, already picturing the look on her face when she struck it for the first time and realized nothing had happened. The thought sent a small rush of satisfaction through him. Over the next few days he acted as if nothing had changed. He carried on quietly, ignoring the stares from Karen. Whenever she walked past, ignoring her little smirks at HOA gatherings, he kept his calm, knowing the package would arrive soon. When it finally did, a heavy box dropped onto his porch by the delivery truck. He wasted no time, carrying it inside with both hands, the weight of it a reminder of its strength. He opened it carefully, his eyes widening at the steel structure inside, thick, cold, unyielding. His fingers brushed against its smooth surface, and for the first time in weeks, he felt hope. He prepared the ground late at night, digging where the old post had stood, shoveling deep until the hole was wide and strong, sweat dripping from his forehead, his body aching but his spirit unbroken. He poured cement into the base, setting the steel post inside, pressing it firm until it stood tall and straight, then mounted the reinforced box onto it, bolting it in place, every screw tightened with purpose, every movement filled with quiet defiance. By the time the first rays of dawn touched the street, the new mailbox stood proudly at the curb, gleaming in the morning light, stronger than anything else on the block. The man stepped back, wiping the dirt from his hands, his chest rising with satisfaction. This wasn't just a mailbox anymore. It was a message. It was a wall. It was a challenge. Across the street, Karen's blinds shifted. Her shadow flickered for a moment, and he knew she had seen it. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just stood there staring back, his eyes steady. Because he knew what she was thinking. She was planning her next move. She would try again. She couldn't resist. But this time when she struck, she would be the one left shaken, and the war she had started would finally begin to turn against her. The night had been long and heavy with work. The man had dug deep into the soil, poured cement with his own hands, and tightened every bolt until his fingers ached. But when he finally stepped back and saw the new mailbox standing tall at the edge of his driveway, gleaming in the faint glow of the streetlight, he felt something he hadn't felt in weeks: control, strength, victory waiting to happen. He wiped the sweat from his brow, his shirt sticking to his back, and whispered quietly to himself, "Try to break this, Karen." The air was cool, the neighborhood silent, everyone asleep behind their curtains. But he knew she would see it in the morning, and the thought alone carried him through the exhaustion. He locked his tools back in the garage and went inside, collapsing onto the couch. His eyes heavy but his mind racing with images of her shocked face. The way her smug smile would crack the first time she tried to smash it. Sleep finally took him, deep and dreamless, until the rays of morning light pressed against his eyelids and woke him. He rose slowly, his body sore but his chest tight with anticipation. Today would be the test. Today Karen would see his answer. He made his coffee but barely drank it. His eyes glued to the window, the new mailbox shining proudly at the curb, unyielding, unmovable. Every minute felt like an hour, and then, at last, he saw her, Karen, striding down her driveway in her pressed blouse, her hair pulled back as neatly as always, a folder tucked under one arm like she was going to war with paperwork. But her eyes, her sharp eyes, caught sight of the mailbox instantly. She stopped mid-step, her head tilted, her lips pursed. She stood there staring at it for several seconds, and he could see the irritation already building in her face. She didn't like surprises. She didn't like being defied. He watched closely as she walked closer to the curb, her heels clicking against the pavement. She stood in front of it, looking it up and down, her mouth tightening. Then she reached out her hand and tapped it with her fingers. The sound that came back was not hollow wood but a deep metallic clang. She frowned, glancing around as though making sure no one was watching. But the man was watching from his window, his breath steady, his eyes sharp. She bent down slightly, inspected the bolts, ran her hand across the thick steel door, and her frown deepened. She straightened her back, looked around once more, and then, with quick suddenness, she reached down and picked up a stone from the edge of the curb. She turned it in her hand, testing its weight, her lips curling into that mean little smirk he knew so well. Then with a sharp swing she smashed it against the side of the box. The sound that rang out was loud and sharp, metal against stone. The rock rebounded instantly, slipping from her grip and bouncing off the pavement, nearly hitting her shoe. She froze, her eyes wide for a second, then quickly looked around to see if anyone had seen. Her hand trembled slightly as she rubbed the spot on the mailbox, but it was spotless, not a dent, not a scratch. The steel stood perfect and unmoved, her lips pressed tight, her face pale under the morning sun. She bent quickly, grabbed the rock again, and hit it once more, harder this time. The clang rang louder, echoing down the street, and the rock slipped from her grasp again. scraping her palm and leaving a faint red mark. She winced, pulled her hand back, and dropped the stone, her head darting left and right. And that was when she noticed curtains moving, neighbors peeking out quietly, their eyes catching her in the act, whispers already starting behind the glass. Her shoulders stiffened, her face burned red. She muttered something under her breath and turned quickly, her heels snapping against the pavement as she stormed back toward her house. But she couldn't erase what had just happened. The new mailbox stood tall and undefeated, while she looked small and humiliated. The man stepped onto his porch just as she reached her door, his arms crossed, his expression calm but heavy. She glanced at him for only a second, and in that second he saw the truth, the crack in her confidence, the flicker of fear in her eyes. She hurried inside, slamming the door behind her, and he stood silently on the porch, the morning light glinting off the steel of his mailbox, a monument to his defiance, a symbol that her games no longer worked. His chest filled with quiet satisfaction as he whispered to himself, "Round one goes to me." But deep down he knew Karen wasn't finished. She never was, and the real battle was still to come. Yet for the first time, she was the one who looked shaken, not him. The next day the man sat on his porch with a calm face, though inside he was burning with anticipation. He knew Karen's pride had been hurt badly when the rock bounced off his new mailbox and left not even a scratch. But he also knew Karen was not the type to let things go. She would come back. She always did. Her obsession with control ran too deep, and if she couldn't break his mailbox, then she would try harder. He drank his coffee slowly, his eyes never leaving the curb where the steel box stood shining in the sunlight, unyielding, unbroken. His silent soldier guarding his property. Hours passed and neighbors went about their routines. Some glanced at the mailbox and whispered to each other, small smiles tugging at their lips as if they already knew what had happened the day before. Word traveled fast, and Karen's humiliation was spreading like a crack in glass. By late afternoon Karen finally appeared, striding out of her house with a determined look, her lips pressed into a hard line, her eyes darting quickly toward the mailbox as though it was mocking her. She carried nothing in her hands at first, but her posture was stiff, her steps fast, and when she reached the curb she paused, staring at the box with pure hatred in her eyes. The man leaned forward slightly in his chair, watching quietly. Neighbors peeked again from behind curtains. One man across the street pretended to water his lawn. Though his eyes never left Karen, she bent down suddenly and from the bag slung at her side she pulled out a small hammer, her hand gripping it tightly. She glanced around quickly, but the eyes on her were everywhere, hidden behind windows and hedges, waiting. Still she raised the hammer and swung it hard against the steel box. The sound echoed loudly, a sharp metallic bang that rang down the street. The hammer recoiled with such force that it nearly slipped from her hand. She gritted her teeth and swung again, harder, her face red with effort. Bang after bang filled the air. The man could see the strain in her body, her arms shaking with every strike. But the box remained flawless, no dents, no cracks. The steel absorbed every blow and stood firm. Karen stopped finally, panting, sweat on her forehead, her palm raw from gripping the handle too tight. She touched the mailbox with her fingers, desperate to find even a scratch she could call a victory. But there was nothing. Her shoulders sagged for a moment. Then she spun around suddenly when she heard laughter. One of the neighbors who had been watching from his yard couldn't hold it in anymore. He chuckled openly, shaking his head. "Looks like you met your match, Karen," he called out. Others peeked more boldly now, murmuring, whispering, some smiling, some shaking their heads, their courage rising as they watched her fail. Karen's face flushed deep red, her jaw tight as she glared at the man on the lawn. Then her eyes darted to the man sitting calmly on his porch, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He didn't need to say a word. His silence was louder than anything. Karen's chest rose and fell quickly, her pride shattered in front of the very people she ruled with fear. She stuffed the hammer back into her bag and stormed off toward her house, muttering under her breath, neighbors whispering louder now. "Did you see that? She lost." The box didn't even move. The man leaned back in his chair, his coffee cool now but his spirit burning with quiet triumph. His mailbox had not only defeated her blows, it had exposed her desperation to the entire neighborhood. The balance of power was shifting. For years she had controlled with threats and fines. But now people had seen her lose, really lose, and the sight of it cracked her image deeper than any letter or rule ever could. The man took a deep breath, the evening breeze brushing against his face, and whispered to himself, "She won't recover from this." Though he knew Karen wasn't finished yet, not completely, she never quit easily. But her grip was slipping, and for the first time it wasn't him standing on shaky ground. It was her. Karen barely came out of her house the next morning, but when she finally did, her face was pale and stiff. She tried to walk as if nothing had happened the day before, as if the sound of her hammer echoing down the street and the laughter of neighbors had been some dream. But the neighborhood hadn't forgotten. They had seen her pride crumble in broad daylight. They had seen the way the mailbox stood tall while she looked weak and desperate. Now whispers followed her everywhere she went. The man sat on his porch again, not saying a word, just watching as she tried to pretend she still held authority. Two women walking their dogs glanced at her, shook their heads and said just loud enough for others to hear, "She's losing it, smashing mailboxes like a child." Karen's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. A teenager riding his bike past called out, "Hey Karen, maybe get a stronger hammer next time." Laughter trailed behind him as he sped off. Karen's face turned red, her fists clenched at her sides. She snapped back, "Show some respect, I'm your HOA president." But the boy only laughed louder and rode away. The man could see the cracks spreading wider. The fear she once inspired was turning into mockery. Neighbors who used to avoid her gaze now looked her in the eye. Some even smirking. Her power was slipping and she knew it. That afternoon another letter arrived, taped to the man's door just like before, the HOA logo printed on top. But this time when he read it he almost laughed. It said, "Your mailbox remains in violation of neighborhood standards," and demanded it be removed. His eyes narrowed. This was desperation. Her last attempt to assert control. He walked calmly to his porch, held the letter up high, and read it aloud for the neighbors nearby. "Violation, remove mailbox," he said with a bitter laugh. This is what she calls leadership. The neighbors who heard shook their heads. One man shouted across the street, "It looks stronger than the whole HOA." Another neighbor said, "That box is the only thing she couldn't break. Maybe that's why she hates it." More laughter followed. Karen stormed out of her house, her face red, her voice shrill. "That mailbox is illegal. It ruins the look of the community. It has to go." But instead of silence like before, voices rose against her. "Illegal, or just unbreakable. Leave him alone. Karen, you've gone too far. We're tired of your games." Her mouth opened but the words caught in her throat. She looked around, eyes darting from face to face. But all she saw was defiance. The fear that once kept them quiet was gone. The man stood on his porch, calm and steady, his arms crossed, his presence strong. Karen's voice faltered as she tried one last time. "I am the president. I make the rules." But someone shouted back, "Not anymore. The rules don't protect bullies." Cheers and chuckles followed. Her authority crumbled right there in the street. She trembled for a moment, then turned sharply, stomping back into her house, slamming the door hard, the sound echoing down the block. The man looked at his mailbox, standing flawless under the sunlight, and for the first time he saw what it had become. Not just protection for his mail, but a symbol of resistance, a wall against her tyranny, and the neighborhood saw it too. Her humiliation was complete, her power broken, and though he knew she would still try to fight, it was clear to everyone that the days of her control were numbered. The street was quiet the next morning, but it was not the same kind of quiet that had existed before. It was the kind of quiet that carried whispers and memories. Neighbors stepping out of their homes gave each other knowing looks, small smiles passing from one to another. Everyone had seen the war between Karen and the man, and everyone knew who had won. The man walked out onto his porch with a calm, steady stride, his eyes falling on the mailbox that still stood tall and flawless at the curb, the steel glinting under the early sun as if it was proud of its own strength. His lips curved slightly, not in arrogance but in satisfaction, because that mailbox was more than just metal and bolts. It was proof that he could not be broken, proof that Karen's grip on the neighborhood was no longer unshakable. He sat down on his porch chair with his coffee in hand, letting the warm steam rise. Neighbors waved as they walked past, something they hadn't done as openly before. One man slowed as he passed and said with a grin, "That box of yours is the strongest thing in the neighborhood." Another neighbor, the old woman with her little dog, added, "You showed her she can't bully everyone forever." Their words filled him with a quiet pride, not because he had embarrassed Karen but because he had stood his ground. He had proven to himself and to them that silence only fed her power, and resistance broke it. Across the street Karen's blinds stayed shut tight. Her car unmoved, her porch empty. She had not stepped outside since the shouting match the day before. And the longer her door stayed closed, the more obvious it became that she wasn't hiding because she was busy. She was hiding because she was ashamed. The mighty HOA president who once walked the neighborhood with her clipboard and sharp tongue was now reduced to whispers and shadows, her name no longer spoken with fear but with mockery. Kids laughed when they rode past her house, imitating her shrill voice. "That mailbox is illegal," before bursting into giggles. Even adults chuckled when they remembered the sight of her hammer bouncing off the steel, her pride breaking with each clang. The man didn't laugh out loud, he didn't need to. His victory wasn't in mocking her but in knowing. She had no power left over him, he had rebuilt what she destroyed, he had turned her attacks into his strength. As the days passed, his mailbox became more than just his. It became a symbol for the whole neighborhood. People would nod at it as they walked by, almost like it was a silent reminder that Karen wasn't unstoppable after all. Slowly neighbors began speaking more freely at HOA gatherings, challenging her rules, questioning her letters. And without their silence to protect her, Karen grew smaller and smaller, her threats fell flat, her fines ignored, her power gone. One evening the man stood by his mailbox, his hand resting on the cold steel, and he thought about everything that had happened, the anger, the destruction, the humiliation, but also the resolve, the rebuilding, and finally the victory. He whispered quietly, "You tried to break me, Karen, but all you broke was yourself." He turned back toward his home, the garden lights glowing softly, his porch warm with the sound of neighbors talking and laughing down the street, life moving forward, stronger, freer. Karen's house sat dark and silent, her presence nothing more than a reminder of how far she had fallen. The man took a deep breath, feeling peace at last. The battle of the mailbox was over, and the symbol of his defiance would stand at the curb for years to come, untouched, unbroken, and unforgettable.